When a new pastor assumes his position in the church, a lot of times what he's shocked to find is these people are sinners. And it's often really difficult for him to see that these people are broken, even though they are redeemed or profess to be. People are going to hurt you, they're going to disappoint you. And a lot of times a new pastor can have a crisis. One of the best things a pastor can do going into a pastoral role, it's counterintuitive. It sounds perhaps the opposite of what he should do, but it's lower his expectations of the church. Raise his expectations of himself, because he can't control them. He can only control himself. And if he just understands that I'm going to go into this with the goal of loving the people and preaching the word faithfully, I'm going to do my best to win people to Christ, point them to the gospel, baptize and disciple them. And I'm not going to be terribly disappointed and upset if these people don't do the things that I think they should do. Instead, I'm going to preach good sermons to the best of my ability. I'm going to study well. I'm going to visit the sick. I'm going to invite people to church and try and win them to Christ and disciple them, because that is what I can control. Another mistake that a young pastor can easily make is to resent his predecessor, especially if he was there for a long tenure. I can just about guarantee at some point someone will look at every pastor and say, you're no, and then fill in the blank with the name of a predecessor, whether it's his immediate predecessor or not. They will inevitably compare him to pastors they've had in the past. The best move for a young man to make at that point is to simply plead guilty to that and say, you're exactly right. I aspire to be as great a pastor as he was. Would you pray for me that the Lord will help me to be faithful as he was? Because it just takes time. Furthermore, that pastor had his same issues. He had the same problems when he came there. A young man can't be too overwhelmed by these comparisons. He needs to understand that really he's part of God's plan and the succession of men that God has brought in to shepherd and lead the people. And there will likely be some that come after him in the same way he's following others. Don't resent that. That's part of God's great plan. For Elijah, there's a successor in Elisha. And so it is that when we follow good and godly men, that we shouldn't resent that. We should rejoice. God used them. And then we should be faithful and stay around long enough for God to use us in the same way, because one day somebody's going to look at your predecessor and say, your successor rather, and say, you're not like him. And that's okay, because we're all part of God's greater work. Another thing that a young pastor will do is that when he faces the inevitable crisis that comes, in fact, crises are really pretty regular. You'll have one about a year in, and then again, usually about 3 years in, about 5 years in. But sometimes when he faces that first crisis, he'll go through it because he'll say, it's too young for me it's too soon for me to quit. But then when he faces the second one, he'll say, I can't go through this again. I can't put my wife through this. And so he'll put the resumes out and start looking for another place to go. Maybe he'll succeed and go somewhere else where he will face a 1-year crisis and a 3-year crisis and really the same problems. It's important that a young pastor determine, I'm going to go there and I'm going to shepherd God's sheep. They're going to sometimes be wayward. They're sometimes going to be disappointing. They're not always going to want what I'm feeding them, but I'm going to love them anyway. I'm going to let God speak and work through me. And as they grow in the Word, and as the pastor simply walks through life with them for a longer period of time, then they begin to grow to each other. But a guy has to be willing to stick it out in order to get there. He can't go in and merely lead. He's got to lead and feed. He can't go in and just feed. He's got to feed and lead. Both things are required to really be a shepherd of God's people.
Thanks for watching Honest Answers. Don't forget to subscribe to find out the answer to next Wednesday's question.